everyone. Welcome to Writing Easy, the podcast that takes the act of writing, which can sometimes be not easy, and tries to make it less not easy. I'm one of your hosts, Mary Mascari.
And I'm your other host, Melissa Long.
Today, we're going to be talking about don't quit your day job.
Oh boy. I feel like this is the thing that I heard so much and I was always like, nah, and I don't like my day job.
Yeah, that's a different problem, see? I had that too for a very long time, where I was really angry at my day job for being a day job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just I was like a teenager, well, you can't force me to be like this. I'm not like you. I'm a writer.
Yep.
Someday I'm gonna and as I've gotten older and I have children going to college very soon, my attitude's changed. But I think I really come to believe that I think a day job is a good thing for a writer.
Yeah.
If you can get one that works with what you're doing. I do IT. I'm a IT person. There's some communications involved, but also some coding stuff, lots of nerdy things. I'm able to do it remotely. Up until recently, I did it part-time. But even now that I'm working full-time, I have an arrangement that says I don't start until 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central, which is where I live, because the first 2 hours of my day are my writing time. And that's how it goes. And if you need me to come in earlier, I can, but then I'm going to duck out so that I can get my writing time. And that is, sacrosanct. And that's worked out really nicely.
Yeah, I feel like I have gone back and forth. So the last year I've been completely on my own, doing my own thing and writing as many hours as I want to write and create. But I've also been taking on freelance jobs in fundraising and consulting and doing freelance writing projects. And that has been a nice, sort of happy medium for me. I think the full-time job that is 40, 50, 60 hours a week, that is what you want to avoid. And that is really, really difficult to find the creative time, energy, bandwidth to do other things while you're so consumed with another job.
Yeah, I think if you have a job that's exhausting you, that might not be so great. I know a lot of people are teachers because you get the summers more or less off. And so you're working your butt off all school year, but then you have 2 months really in the summer to dedicate to writing, which is another way of balancing it.
Yeah.
If you've got a job that's just draining you, you're not going to have anything left for writing. But I think if you've got a job that's draining you, there's something else going. I don't know. See if you can find a different one. I mean, it's easy to sit here and say, but
yeah.
Find a different one. Why is that so hard? Yeah, it really is. Yeah, so that's a thing to avoid. But I think generally speaking, having a source of income that isn't writing, I think will take the pressure off a little bit. You don't have to. I mean, and there's the other thing. It's then that pressure might be good, right? I have to do this writing. I have to do it because this is how I live, and so you've got to do it. There's a certain amount to that. There's something to be said. And if you are someone without dependents and can afford to do that, that might work for you. I know for me, I had some time between jobs where I didn't need to work, and I was like, I'm going to write all the time. And I didn't write any more than I did when I had my job.
Yeah, that's the myth right there, is that you think, because now I have a wide open schedule, I'm going to write 6 hours a day and I'm going to get, 5 or 10,000 words a day. My productivity is going to go through the roof, and it just doesn't. It takes I feel like the people who do that, who are professional full-time writers and talk about writing every day and cranking out 5 or 10,000 words a day easy, they've trained for that. They've been doing it for so many years that they've been able to build up to that. But if you just quit your job last week, you think you're going to sit down and suddenly start pumping out all of these words, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on you, and you're going to feel a lot of, anxiety and frustration that you're not able to write more. It's hard. It's a hard transition, I will say too.
I'll bet. Yeah. Um, I think it's good to stay, if you can, in your field. Like if you can get a day job that has something to do with writing, with the writing industry, if that's, or, if whatever years you're trying to do, what area you're trying to work in, that would probably pay off in the long run. You're building some equity there. Whereas, like the work I'm doing in IT has nothing to do with the work what I'm writing. It doesn't carry over at all, but that's okay. It's fine.
See, I like that.
Okay.
I think
like having a break.
I think it's better because I like with the grant writing, even though it's a different type of writing, it's still writing. And so I found that whenever I was doing heavy grant writing, I could not write or create anything. But if I was working on a different type of, like I was doing a PowerPoint thing, or if I was developing a training, that didn't stop me from, like, at the end of the day wanting to sit down and write and create, because I wasn't doing that, like putting sentences together and then editing it and then like trying to bring words forth onto the page. Like, so for me, I needed something completely different. I talked to another screenwriter, like a working screenwriter who wrote a bunch of horror movies a few weeks ago. And we were talking about this because I was like, I need another job and I don't know what to look for. And he's like, I was a baker. He's like, I worked in a bakery. And he's like, it was great because I had a lot of time to think and I was using my hands and it was just a different type of rhythm, so I wasn't burnt out, and it was an earlier schedule because we had to get up early to make all the stuff for Breakfast Rush, right? And so he's like, there's a lot of surprising paths that like can tap into other aspects of your, soulful needs and your physical needs and provide for you that aren't writing specific, but that will open up more freedom for you to write and create without the like added stress. Whereas like I know lawyers who are like, no, I'm like so stressed. There's so much pressure. He was like, I'm making bread. Like nobody cares. Like if I burn a loaf, I burn a loaf, right? Like, whereas like, if you're a lawyer, you're like, oh, if this client goes to jail because I wasn't paying attention, like it's a different level, right? The stakes are different.
That's interesting. So it sounds like what we're kind of discovering here is that it's obviously individual, but it's something you need to kind of think about. What is a good kind of way of supporting yourself? Are you the kind of person that if you have to rely on writing to write, for your living, that's going to motivate you and give you the discipline you need to do it? Because I've read that in some places where they're like, yeah, no, you gotta commit, man. Like this, if you want this to be your job, then make it your job. And I'm like, well, maybe. Or if you're the kind of person who wants to work adjacent to the thing and that helps feed it, great. Or do you need to be away from it completely and do something completely unrelated to kind of reset? But I will say it's very hard to write when you are worried about, paying the bills. Am I going to make rent? Like, I can't imagine that that's a good scenario for writing. If you are hungry and you don't know, if you're worried about your car breaking down, you'll never get it, like there's no way to live. That's not, and that's also not, you don't have to do that, right? You don't have to live in this, make these sacrifices like that. You don't have to live in poverty in order to be an artist. You don't have to do that to earn it. You don't feel like that's part of the sacrifice you must make. You cannot be comfortable in order to make good art. I must be starving. I must be this, la boheme sort of thing. And that's not true at all. It's absolutely not true.
It's not true. And I feel like we should say that again with emphasis, because there are so many people who have gone through that journey who will tell you it's true, right? Because they feel like I suffered, right? Especially in Hollywood, where it's like, oh, well, I was an assistant. I started in the mailroom and I did this for no pay and worked with, like, had 4 roommates. And like, they want you to go through that. They don't want to change the system because they're like, well, then it's not fair because I had to do all this. Yeah. And like, I think that we're starting, like, there's a thing going on now called like, I can't even remember. But there's like an assistance, like living wage campaign that is going on right now in LA, because like a lot of these folks are making, like, living at poverty levels. Like, you're just making $20,000 or $30,000 a year in a city where like the poverty level is like 60 or 70,000. Like, it's just disgusting when you look at the gap in pay.
Yeah,
across the board for film and
because
television.
they can.
Yeah, just because you can, right? And so I do think that you are absolutely right. Like, you don't want the stress of the money and like all of the worry and anxiety about like, how am I going to pay rent? Am I going to like, do I have money for my gas? Can I keep the car? Like, all of that will completely distract you from being creative. If you have the savings or somebody else or a spouse or partner or somebody else that you're leaning on, then that's a different story. But it can be a big distraction, and it can cause you to write out of this sort of desperation mode and to take projects or assignments or say yes to things that aren't going to help your career long term. Like, a lot of times when people get into bad contracts, it's because they were writing out of desperation.
From a publishing perspective, the model that I've seen for a lot of people is they have a day job, and then eventually they get to a point where, oh, you know what, I think I can do this full time, but they, I can think of lots of examples of very successful writers. One that's coming to mind is N.K. Jemisin, right? She won I don't know 16 Hugos, and she still had her day job, and then eventually she's like, let's see if I can set up a Patreon. And she did, and she's like, wow, look at this. I can live off this. But, she's very accomplished, and she's amazing. Yeah. But even she took her time. She didn't just run off and do it. So you have to find, you can do it. You can have a full-time job and write. It depends on, you have to find the way to make it work. Maybe it's taking a job that has different hours so that you are available to write during the time that you are most productive. Maybe it's a job that with a lot of downtime that lets you, scribble on things while you're waiting. I don't know. Maybe it is a job that has a lot of writing adjacent stuff, whatever. But you have to find what's going to work for you so that you can put the two things together. For me, it was a job that let me work from home so that I could use the time that I would normally commute to write. And yeah, so you just have to find what works, but don't listen to anyone who tells you that there's only one way and that it has to be this sort of austere, starving, anything for my craft bullshit. Because it's just not true.
Yeah, not true at all. I will say too, like, most people come at this in terms of money, right? They think, okay, job, I need money to sustain myself and live up to all my responsibilities as an adult. And that's true. But I think there are other reasons not to quit your day job. And like, one of the things that I found for me writing full time was that I thought, oh, I'm an introvert. I've worked from home for years. So like, I'll be fine. I actually like the routine of like having a couple of meetings, not like 20 meetings a week, but I liked having like a regular meeting. I liked having a project, like a people to brainstorm with and to have conversations with. And I didn't like being alone all day, every day with this like blank screen, like saying, hey, you're supposed to be working on me. And so just for the socialization and for the creativity that comes with like getting out of the house and being in a different space when we were allowed to do that, right? Like there's all of these other factors that also play into the power of having a day job. And plus, like, I would find tons of story ideas on that journey out in the conversations that I had with my coworkers who were not writers, who were doing something completely different. And I'd be like, oh, well, this is funny. I should use this thing in my story. So there's other benefits to having a day job that are not just about money.
It's like the famous thing about Andy Kaufman, how he bussed tables at a diner. Well, even when he was still like on Taxi and, very successful, he'd still kept that job bussing tables because he felt like it kept him connected to the real world.
Oh, yeah.
And he needed it to do his stuff. Which, and Andy Kaufman's connection to the real world was tenuous at best. But, you need to talk to people like human beings and do stuff with them. And it's okay to have a day job that means something to you too. You can like your day job. That's allowed also. That's fine. You're allowed to like your day job. It doesn't make you less of an artist.
But I did get to a point where, so for me, I liked my day job. I was working in fundraising and nonprofit organizations for national nonprofits. And I found that there was a level that I wasn't willing to cross because I knew I wanted to write. And so
Yes.
like I kept getting promoted and promoted. And then like suddenly I was like, no, I don't want to move up, because there's a certain level of commitment and responsibility and just like other obligations that came with that title change, that I had to say, like, if I make this shift, then like I'm going to be in this for the long haul. Like there's just not room for me to pursue a creative career. And so that's something that you also have to think about and know yourself is like, definitely look for things that you're still excited and passionate about and that's fulfilling you, but also be wary of like taking something that's going to be too tempting. It's going to become the thing that you do all the time. Or you just accept that and say, okay, well, I'm just going to write for fun, right? You know, if this gets published, that's fine. But if you're trying to make a career as a published novel, like just think about that balance there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that you have to kind of decide. I mean, personally, I for day jobs, like unless you're saving lives, you shouldn't have to work more, that much. You should like work your job and then go home, like just no matter what. But yeah, no, to know yourself, I think that's a really good point. Know who, like how far you're willing to go, how much you're going to give, and yeah, if it's like, hey, you're really good at this, because a lot of times you might be better because you're like, you might be taking a lower level job than you would otherwise, than you're qualified for, right? So they'll recognize, oh, you're overqualified. Let's promote you up. I know for my work, they were like, come be a manager. And I was like, no, I don't want that.
Exactly.
You are here every weekend. I don't want to do that.
Yep.
Thank you. In general, no matter what it is, if you should definitely, don't take the promotion if you don't, if you have other things you want, even if it's just sitting on the couch, but, yeah, I think the upshot of this whole thing is just, it's more complicated than it may seem. You are allowed to have a day job. You should have a day job. It doesn't make you less of an artist if you have one. It doesn't make you more of an artist if you don't. You just have to kind of find what works for you, for your life, your obligations, and your writing process.
Yeah. And then set your expectations for what you achieve creatively based on the amount, the space and the capacity you have to produce or create content, right? Like don't compare or set expectations of somebody who is writing 20 or 30 or 40 hours a week to like I've only got 10 hours a week to devote to this. It will make you feel miserable and you'll start to judge yourself and feel like a failure because you're not being as prolific and not writing as much. But everybody has a different pace that they move, but also they have different space. I think the one thing that I noticed was not like my word count did not go up at all. Like it just didn't. I was not more prolific, but I had way more ideas. I did have the space to create in a way that I hadn't before. And I was like, I feel like I'm on this just like high of like every time I turn around, I see an idea. I have new characters. I have way more like outlines and plots and like half-baked ideas where I like got to play around with something and then be like, oh, this is not the story that I want to write right now, that I just never even would have thought of because I didn't have the capacity or the time to come up with those ideas, to play with them, to research them a little bit. So there was that was an added benefit from having more space and time. But again, like I didn't have to be full-time to do that. I was actually working part-time. So it's like I had 20 hours instead of 5 on the weekend. Yeah, you gotta find what works. And one of my favorite things, I heard this on Queer Eye, so it's good, is compare and despair. Like don't compare yourself to other people. That's just don't ever. It never ends up well. Don't.
No.
Just do your thing.
It's upsetting. Yeah, just do your thing, man. Just do your thing. All right. Speaking of doing our things, I think we're gonna go do some other thing. Because I think we've covered this thing.
We did it. We did the thing. It's done.
We did the thing. Yay. Ting. So my son puts his homework in this one to do application. And when he completes something, it makes this happy ding sound. This little ding. And like he loves it. So it's like he finishes something. It's like, okay, wait, shh, here we go. Click. ding, and we're like, yay! So
I love it.
we should all have that in our lives.
Right.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap up. The only thing is just to ask you guys, remember to, whatever means you have available to you, to feedback that this is good stuff. If you like it, rating, reviewing, liking, subscribing, all of those things that have taken new meanings in this new millennium. Please do those things, because they will help other people find this podcast, and maybe they will dig it just as much as you do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just share. You don't even have to, if you can't figure out how to just text the link in the podcast app to one of your friends that's a writer.
Yeah, that's it.
Pick
a friend who's a writer and say, hey, have you heard this? You might like it. That would be amazing.
Yes.
But with that, let us just remind you all that writing is hard.
So take it easy.
I'm Mary.
And I'm Melissa.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.